Good. Now I have to be the right direction. Oh, wait, did I get stuck? I think I did. I think I got stuck. Oh no! Game's bugged. It's made invisible walls. I can't leave. Is it gonna fix when this comes down? There we go. All planned. Don't mind him. He's just the stinker you'll see if you go to watch me play these games live over at twitch.tv/soimaginative. Anyway, hi, I'm So Imaginative. I'm the Sonic hater from the title, and that's only a joke about 60% of the time. See, I've got friends who would be considered fans of the Hedgehog, and I enjoy taking the piss. I like joking about the fact that 99.9% of the 3D games are garbage, how it's a dying franchise, and how all the positive reaction for Sonic Frontiers was absolutely huffing copium. But while I say these things in a very jokey manner, I have in some manner of respect held these opinions at some point. But not because I'm actually a hater. This is just my experience with Sonic. To me, these are the facts. Specifically, that last one about Frontiers. But I'm not someone to typically hate without basis. I'm very open to things, and I'd rather understand why people enjoy something than baselessly go 12 rounds with it. Trust me, when I hate something, I'm very clear about it. It would be more accurate to say I don't truly understand the appeal of Sonic, never really have, and I mean, I haven't played one since Colors, so that certainly isn't helping. I don't really remember all that much since Sonic Rush, which is the first time I played one to begin with. But excluding Frontiers, my relationship with Sonic has been on the up. I love those little meme dubs, you know, it's so sad that Steve Jobs died of Ligma. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the movies. I mean, hell, I still remember the Sonic Underground theme song, so clearly there is some enjoyment buried deep down in there. I just needed the right time, the right chance to give the games a proper shot, which is where this bad boy comes in. This is Sonic X Shadow Generations. I've always heard good things about Generations, with it being a seemingly a high point for the middle modern Sonic titles, and here was a very good looking remaster with some new Shadow levels that were generating a ton of hype. It seemed like the perfect time, so why not join me for a little jog down Radical Highway as a Sonic hater tries to understand what there is to love about Sonic. I'll be straight with you. It didn't take long for me to start getting that intrinsic enjoyment out of this game, maybe like halfway through Green Hills Act 1, which for anyone that hasn't played it is the first level. When Sonic's legs start doing like the motion blurring as he's running along, it's hard for it not to tickle the brain a little bit. The sense of speed as you rocket through this fairly simple introductory course, popping the little robot things with that cute little bump sound effect, I was at least entertained. Or just sort of chasing sound effects as you run your way through the stage, whether it be rings or Sonic's little rev-up noises. It feels very designed to always be scratching that itch. Then, every now and again, it will force you to slow down and deal with an obstacle in this sort of ebb and flow of speed. I was caught very off guard, because watching gameplay of 2D Sonic does not get across how smooth the feel of constant movement can be, at least to me it doesn't, and this was something I found to increase exponentially when the 3D kicks in. We'll discuss this more in detail as we go, but I'll just lay it out now. I easily preferred 3D Sonic to 2D Sonic. Not only is the camera placement much more pleasant for stuff like, oh, I don't know, seeing the things that are trying to kill you, but it's just more interactive. You have so much more control over Sonic's fuzzy blue button, there's more to do. You have to position yourself in the correct lane, get rings to keep the boost gauge up, and because you can see the course ahead of you, planning your route on the fly is a lot more feasible. It's just a smoother overall experience, and this is something that generally persisted through the stages. And speaking of stages, there are 9 stages, right? All with 2 acts. You get them in groups of 3, and then you've got a boss at the end of each set, with an additional boss at the end. These are all stages taken from previous games, excluding the final boss. You've got stuff like Chemical Plant from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, City Escape from Sonic Adventure 2, and the insufferable hell pit that is Crisis City. Oh gee, I wonder which game could have spawned such a nonsense stage. The stages are a very important thing to note when it comes to Sonic Generations, because Generations is a celebrations title. It was released in 2011 for Sonic's 20th anniversary, and it basically dictates the game's entire existence. Even the story is about this thing that eats time, which is why Sonic has to go back for all these iconic locations. The explanation being that 2D Sonic is his younger self. It's actually an adorable premise, and all of this cobbled together, half-assed explanation of Sonic Generations is why it was perfect for my purposes. See, if you're looking to understand why people enjoy Sonic, you can't really do much better than Generations because it's got a bit of everything. It's this kaleidoscopic guided tour through Sonic's history, good and bad, mechanically and design-wise, and the 3D games hadn't quite jumped off a cliff yet. As guided tours go, it's also pretty painless. The conceit goes that as you complete stages, you are reclaiming time, presented through the return of colour in the hub. Oh my god! We uncreamed Tails. The hub is just a straight line with stages on it, but once you get to the first boss, it does try to mix things up a bit. To do a boss, you need to unlock its gate, and to unlock its gate, you need 3 challenge keys. I didn't spend a ton of time with the challenge levels, because it's not what I was here for at all, but they can be a neat change of pace. Some of them just have you running a stage with a side objective, like there being only one ring on a map full of spiky balls to make you fear for your life, and others have a sort of a special ability, like being able to summon Tails for some light flying. I did find it a touch disruptive, having to do 3 per boss, but there are a lot more of these challenges, so it could have been a lot worse. Along the way, you're also attempting to collect the Chaos Emeralds for stuff, and that takes you through the rival battles. Rival battles are sort of mini-boss fights with Metal Sonic, Shadow, and Silver, ranging from alright to fucking kill me. I should admit, the want for death was mostly my own fault. The Silver fight's final mechanic is this giant ball you have to run away from. I was still very green at this point and hadn't grasped the intricacies of how Sonic likes to lay out the screen. So when I saw this, I assumed it was like the Truck and City Escape where you have to boost to avoid becoming roadkill, but it is not at all. I ran out of boost every time and done diddly died. What actually happens is there's a change in perspective, and the entire screen in front of you is yours to use, something I only discovered after holding down out of desperation. I was greatly upset at myself. As game time padding goes, I've seen worse. I think the big thing for me was I felt ripped away from the part of the game I was actually enjoying, which was, wait for it, the stages. What a perfectly placed full circle, if I do say so myself. Generation stages do such a good job at keeping the game fresh for a few different ways. Obviously, you're literally running different levels, but they also have great visual designs and many have frankly banging soundtracks. What's that one song that like every Sonic fan knows by heart? Exist and Educate? I'm also a big fan of how they evolve with their structure and mechanics. Green Hills is, as far as I'm aware, the standard Sonic level. Chemical Plant then introduces the unnecessarily real fear of drowning. Sky Sanctuary has an awesome sense of verticality. I am very fond of Speed Highway's Le Scoop. I just wish they'd solved their little problem with swine. City Escape. Seaside Hills has all the cannons and pretty wildly varying paths for above and below, also motor vehicle. Crisis City has a deeply brewed mixture of fire and trauma. Rooftop Run, I just adore, however these guys can pleasantly stop existing. And then there's Planet Wisp, with the very normal gimmick of the Wisp powers. I'm genuinely a big fan of how each stage throws a different challenge your way, and the first time through I just wanted to keep experiencing that next level, see what was round the next corner, because it's so intoxicating, running through these iconic levels and stages and getting a taste for how Sonic evolved as a whole. That's why I made a whole meal about the challenges earlier, because they really tear the pacing to shreds for me, which is further complicated by the bosses, which I shall be clear about, I'm not a fan. I wouldn't say I hate them, but even on the first time, the issues with them are just so prevalent. First you have Death Egg Robot from Sonic the Hedgehog 2. First phase, easy peasy lemon squeezy, you have to slap him on the ass, you let him jump over you, and Ant-Man his Thanos if you get what I'm saying. Stage 2 almost resets the progress I'd made with Sonic. You enter this horseshoe-shaped arena, hit the button to spawn a bomb, make Egg hit bomb, and awkwardly right arm to jump on head. This process can go wrong at just about every step, aside from hitting the button. You might accidentally jump into the bomb, you might end up with no platforms and not be able to reach his arm. I had this really fun interaction a couple times where he'd get stunned from the bomb but his arm would pull back anyway, so you just kind of had to wait around until you felt like going for another round. Then the second boss is Perfect Chaos, and the biggest crime Perfect Chaos ever committed is being bland AF. I'm not especially fond of the design in Wholesale, but then all you have to actually do is get close to him, boost your way up to the top to do damage. It'll then give you the next part of the course, and rinse repeat. It's not very exciting. Egg Dragoon is the third boss and the one that annoys me the most, because it's probably the best boss, but also decided to be the most finicky. It's an infinite one-way situation where you're forever chasing the Dragoon and trying to catch up. I'm not entirely sure on the specific conditions for beating the boss, all I know is I had to hit the head a few times and catch the stomach once, because the whole thing is that the boss is in 2 pieces. There are a few ways you can do this. The easiest and simplest is to actually catch these ramps when they show up. You do a measly little rail grind, and as long as you don't stuff it, you're basically getting free head. The major obstacle to achieving this feat is his array of lethal weapons. He's got ice attacks and fire attacks, both of which are moderately cringe. But then the stage goes 2D. You're trying to get close enough to catch his stomach hitbox, but I'll be honest, this bit's a turd. You dodge the ice, grab the rings, yada yada, and then right at the end he'll get close for like half a second and just leave again. I think in my various attempts at this boss, I only actually hit him through this once. Especially because until you break the head, he'll keep stopping you with this wall jump sequence. Eventually you'll start to get a free-falling segment, and this is the actual most likely place you'll get the stomach hit and beat the boss. I like that Age-of-Green has actual mechanics and mixes the 2D and 3D side of things, but it's also the jankiest son of a chicken I've ever seen. Trying to navigate the runway sections can feel impossible sometimes with the camera going walkies and a slight sluggishness to trying to avoid things. This leads into the wider issue of just trying to catch up to things in this game. This might just be a Sonic thing, I really don't know, but whether you can catch up to something or not feels so arbitrary and dragged out. I'm really not a fan of any of these sequences. Which is funny because by far the biggest culprit of this exact problem is the final boss, Time Eater. While I was playing live over at twitch.tv/theimaginative, subtle plug, I was warned that this is one of the worst Sonic bosses ever made, and I could not have set my expectations low enough. This is one of the most painstaking and honestly kind of pointless bosses I've ever experienced, never mind in my limited experience with Sonic. There's a not insignificant build-up to Time Eater, with it showing up every now and again just to, say hi, and they make a really big deal about using the Chaos Emeralds to fix the boss gates for it. You even start the boss with both eras of Sonic going Super Sonic, just for you to then spend the next 10 minutes of your life, it feels like longer, pressing boost. This is it. This is the entire experience. You occasionally grab rings so that you don't run out, you dodge the slowest tracking missile move in history, and eventually charge into the glowing yellow bit around here. I'm just assuming I'm pointing in the right place, and until he takes damage, and then you rinse and repeat that for like 3 more times. Time Eater absolutely demolishes the ending of this game, which is such a shame, because Sonic Generations is only like a few hours long if you follow the main path. I had it finished in like 4, I think. Yeah, and to end that with a boss of such tedium, and that is lacking in all of the areas a boss should really not be lacking in, it really pulls away from the whole experience. Despite that, I'm still looking on Sonic Generations favourably on the whole. I may not have been a big fan of the challenge stages, but that's a personal preference issue. For the most part, I'm respecting what the game is putting forward. You can get collectibles for higher ranks, there's like platforming and stuff to get to the challenges. The whole thing has good to great music design, and again, I cannot stress enough that I kind of love the gauntlet of stages and the different challenges they give you. I can already imagine the appeal to trying to get that best time. I think my biggest critique at this point is just that I wish you had more to do as Sonic. It's a bit deeper in the 3D stages, where you've got like more movements and attacks and stuff, but generally speaking, Sonic stays the same once you've got the basic moveset, and a lot of it goes underutilized, like the slide. You're always playing through the stage rather than learning how to deeper play Sonic outside of like Planet Wisp, where you have the Wisp powers. I know the level's a pain in the arse, and it's really long when you don't know where you're going, but at least transforming into a pink spiky ball and an orange rocket mixes things up a little bit. Oh hey, was that Shadow? After some brief cutscenes, you're thrown into Space Colony Arc Act 1. Insane set design, the ability to stop time, and scene transitions that would put Doctor Strange to shame. Shadow wastes no time, showing that he is better than Sonic in every conceivable fashion, besides game performance, because Generations is like 13-14 years old. Shadow Generations takes pretty much all the good from Sonic's half of the game, and also decided to fix most of my issues with it. And it all starts with Shadow himself, the ultimate life form, which is hilarious because I never would have figured the apex creature was a hedgehog. He controls a lot smoother for a start. I don't think I clicked how weighty Sonic feels till playing Shadow, and they also made some tweaks to the control scheme, which I'm a big fan of. It all feels much more precise, which allows for those sick moments where you just demolish a stage. There are also little things, like his lock-on attack being more of a teleport, which leads to funky moments where you can use it to go through grates and stuff. I know that's just a Shadow thing, but it's just nice. Oh, and did I mention you can stop time? Chaos Control is an ability you have access to for most of your time as Shadow that allows you to stop time for like 5 seconds, and it has some awesome applications. Some objects that would harm you become bridges when frozen. There are these little green orbs that become shortcuts through Chaos Control, and even stops the match clock, the level clock, which I have to imagine is a speedrunner's wet dream. And that's only the first of Shadow's many abilities. You've also got Doom Spears, which are projectiles used for stunning enemies and puzzle solving. Doom Blast is probably my favourite because it allows you to commit the Yeetus and it still counts as progress. You've got Doom Surf, which lets you ride Mantine. Doom Morph is a what-if story where Spider-Man turns into an octopus, and then you've got the Doom Wings, which let you literally just skip half the course at the cost of a constant ring drain, a la Super Sonic. These powers are exactly what I mean about wanting more to do with Sonic. Just give my fingers something else to do every now and again, new ways to interact with the environment and puzzle solve. It doesn't hurt that they're also a key part of the story and stages of Shadow Generations. We'll come back round to the story because I want to gush about these stages real quick. If you thought I was enjoying the Sonic stages, because I told you I was, then just wait for these bad boys. There are fewer stages for Shadow 6 to Sonic's 9, but I'd argue the overall quality is much higher. We start in the picturesque sci-fi scape of Space Colony Arc, a stage even I know the importance of, and if you're comparing the base stages of both games, it's not even funny how hard this one wins. You even get to kick a missile in slow-mo. Rail Canyon gives you a miniature version of the truck trauma from City Escape, but it comes at you from out of absolutely nowhere. Kingdom Valley might be my favourite stage in the game, which stunned me when I found out it was from Sonic 06, has an exceptional flow and aesthetic. Sunset Heights levels up the cinematic nature of the Shadow campaign. Chaos Islands has a unique concept, even if it doesn't quite hit the mark and just so happens to be the Sonic Frontiers level, by the way. Then you've got the full version of Radical Highway. You see Radical Highway a few times before this point, when Starro the Conqueror Dr. Stranges you there for a stint. This is where they give you the full unlock of the Doom Wings and tell you to just kinda go ham. It feels harder to pick specific aspects that I like about the stages for Shadow because they're all just much more versatile and make use of different pathways and your various abilities, plus the fact that many of them have bits like this. How cool is that? Shadow's so cool, man. No wonder they got Keanu Reeves. Before we move on though, I feel I need to mention the Act 1, Act 2 differential, the equation that helped them solve video game adaptations. Nah, I'm just pulling rings out your pocket. See, for Sonic, the Act 1, Act 2 thing feels pretty good, because Act 1 is 2D, and Act 2 is mostly 3D, for every stage to celebrate the differences Sonic has seen throughout the years. Shadow doesn't really have a basis in 2D, and I think they know that. Act 1 is pure 3D, but then Act 2 is a mixture of the two, and it just comes across a little bizarre, especially because Shadow and his stages do play so well in that 3D space, and there's no real difference between Shadow's 2D and 3D gameplay. It feels a bit forced. It also leads Act 1 to pretty much always feel like the superior level, but that is very much my personal preference to begin with, so make of that what you will. Fortunately, we can now move into the bosses, which once again Shadow wins easily. He may as well have coded the game himself. I have no idea what I meant by that. BioLizard is a BioLizard who has a big ol' hit me here contraption on his back. You're on like an artificial O-ring around him, and he creates arms to pound you with, creating shockwaves like the good old classic bosses. You want to break those arms and ride the bubbles up to his core. Simple, but effective. Then you've got Metal Overlord from Sonic Heroes. Best boss? Definitely the one I'm fondest of. This whole thing is an on-rails water ride as you chase the Blue Eyes White Dragon using your spin attack to throw trash at him. He's also got quite an enjoyable stage too, where you're like circling him as he throws missiles at you. The grey ones you can hit, the red ones you cannot. Getting the hitboxes right on some of these is much more gratifying than I can explain in words. Oh, and I almost forgot. He's a fan of Zelda tennis. The penultimate boss is Mephiles? Mephile? I don't know how to pronounce that. From Sonic 06. This one is a twinge more awkward as it centers on the octopus mode and at one point actually gives you free control over the camera for a mechanic. It's not very well communicated, but you get the hang of it. I imagine there's a part of you that may be thinking that these bosses still aren't all that impressive, and I'd probably agree with you, but there is something I purposefully missed from all of these bosses just so I could once again kick Sonic while he's down. They all have sick as hell ending sequences. BioLizard ends by blowing his attack back at him and using the remnants to get up there and beat him up yourself. Honestly, Sonic could never. Metal Overlord throws a ship at you, but it's got missiles on it, so you blow the thing to smithereens, stop time, and launch all the pieces at him at once. And Mephiles just gets absolutely obliterated. He is never showing his face again. Cinematics is an area they understood on a much grander scale when it came to Shadow Generations. You probably don't get 10 minutes without something very much wicked happening. Now we've been here before, haven't we? An overall very enjoyable experience tainted by its final boss. Will history repeat itself? That joke might be funnier when we actually talk about the story, but no, it will not. History is not on a loop. Devil Doom and Neo Devil Doom are a fair step up from Time Eater. It has a much better build-up with the egg thing, and Radical Highway Act 2 leads straight into the boss fight. It truly is a culmination of the Shadow Generations experience. Shadow Generations experience. I put the S in the wrong place. It's nothing special, and it's nothing we haven't done even with inside Generations, but the way it mixes up the setting, the boss design, and the level structure makes it a really fitting end, even if there is an unnecessarily long Doom morph portion toward the end, which is just so unnecessarily long. But they make up for it when Shadow just anime punches his way through Neo Devil Doom to save the day. Sorta. Kinda? Maybe? He did good by someone, and that's sort of what matters for the story. Generations sees Shadow go around this new 3D open hub world thing as he unlocks powers and uncovers the mystery of his own existence. The hub world doesn't support this very well. It's not atrocious, but it is a bit naff. The design of the hub world has the same issues I have looking from the outside in at Sonic Frontiers. The actual story that takes place here, however, puts the basically non-existent one in Sonic Generations to shame. Interestingly, I think this is partly because Shadow simply does not have the history that Sonic does. Yes, Shadow is pretty prominent as far as hedgehogs go, but it does seem like they don't know how to really give him the spotlight very well, and the few times they have tried, they have biffed it. I mean, it's the year 2024, and everyone still thinks of Shadow holding a gun. I just want to point out, I wrote this before the new trailer came out, and he had a gun. That I didn't. Yes. This means Generations doesn't have a whole lot to pull from, and it led to a surprisingly tight story about Shadow's origins and purpose. While he's exploring his creation and connection to Devil Doom in events that precede 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog, he also gets to reconnect with Maria. Now, I knew vaguely about Maria, but for those of you that don't, Maria and Shadow basically grew up together on Space Colony Arc and became close friends. When the Space Colony Arc was attacked, Maria was caught in the crossfire and killed. This is why Sonic fans experience uncontrolled maniacal laughter every time that little girl shows up in the Sonic 3 trailers. My understanding is that Shadow's connection and memories of Maria are basically the only thing that keeps him on side. So, when she shows up with Robotnik Sr. in the hub world, she basically becomes the emotional core of the story, as Shadow basically has to relearn how to fight for good. It's not going to be winning the Booker Prize for compelling literature anytime soon, but given that it's limited to only a few cutscenes and the bar set by Sonic Generations was, hey, have you ever heard of a plot before? I was kind of jamming with it. Now, there is the possibility that by this point in the video, you've caught onto a trend, which is that I prefer Shadow quite significantly to Sonic in just about every area of the game. Part of that may be that Shadow Generations is simply a more up-to-date game with more to pull from the franchise and more lessons learned in general, but that doesn't deny that the gameplay is better, the visuals more interesting, the whole experience generally cleaner. I think the only thing I can really give to Sonic over Shadow is the larger quality of musical bangers and performance. But it's not that Shadow performs super badly. Even my footage is a bad indicator because sometimes when I stream I get funky issues. But hey, that's more or less both games covered. It's kind of empty, doesn't it? Like I've missed something. I don't feel in the space to make a conclusion, which is why I'm not yet, as I'm sure you've noticed by wiggling the mouse to see how long the video has left. This whole playthrough, I've had that thought in my mind. What draws people to Sonic? Why do they play it? Realistically, I think I knew this from the beginning. I just needed to kind of get in there and see it for myself. I've alluded to it a few times throughout the video. Hell, the game looks you in the eyes and tells you straight to your face. Time to next rank. Chase the S rank, the lower time, the higher score. Find new skips, find the red rings, find whatever those things are called. Learn the levels. Sonic is not a one and done story game, something I am sure people are mad at me for talking so much about. I'm sorry, I'm a story person. But no, Sonic is a series of time trials with diverse and fun levels. It's why the ones that diverge from that are always controversially handled. I was never going to understand Sonic until I'd run that race and chased that time. So, I set myself a goal I ordinarily wouldn't even consider. I was going to S-rank every main mission in Sonic and Shadow Generations. It's interesting how different you start to see the game from that first time through. Originally, your only goal is to get through the stage by any means necessary, and it's so much simpler, and there is so much less you have to worry about. But when you're going through the S ranks, you need to understand how they're actually measured. Ranks D through A are decided by your score, which is calculated based on your time and ring count. But there is another gate before getting into S rank. As I found out the hard way, you cannot pass into the next life. Sometimes you'll absolutely smash the A rank, but instead of giving you a time to next rank, it will say perfect clear, aka get good. This is where the learning comes in. You need to find the most optimal route that you personally can run, while also memorizing the locations of important enemies and traps. You need to know what's coming around the next corner, and you need to learn how to get past those areas that you personally struggle with. This is why the whole game for me is a massive pain in the ass, because I have a memory like a sieve and eyes that work completely based on movement. I'm like a T-Rex. I should stress that actually getting S ranks isn't all that difficult for the average gamer. Most of the difficulty comes from learning the stages to a point where you can get an appropriate time, which is something I specifically am ill-equipped to achieve. But once you've cleared that hurdle, it's relatively plain sailing. I imagine what it comes down to are the specific mechanical things that you struggle with. Take me, for example. I didn't struggle all that much on the 3D courses, except for specific issues where I'd miss platforms because I'd try to get ahead of myself, general game jank, or very specifically, the awkward fire hitboxes in Crisis City and the instant water death in Seaside Hills. 2D, however, was a lot more tragic. This circles back to what I was saying earlier with my clear preference for 3D. The difference between the two grew even larger on this S-rank grind. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of the limited vision, but that I can live with. It's stuff like Sonic's floatiness that ended up being a much bigger problem for me, likely because I've never spent a huge amount of time with platformers. But the real kicker was actually how Sonic interacts with enemies. 2D Sonic hasn't yet learned how to launch himself like a cannonball, so he has to use much more classical methods like jumping on his foes. As long as Sonic is in this jumping animation, he will destroy his enemies and use them as a launch pad. However, said enemies are often placed perfectly to annoy you. The jump pad effect of hitting an enemy is handy, but can often be a little unwieldy to control. Never mind the fact that on a number of occasions, I would jump with the explicit purpose of committing death just to hit the floor a centimeter before my foe and instead run into them face first, losing all my rings and my dignity. This is a relatively minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of things, but it's a minor inconvenience that I kept running into, and it drove me nuts. One of my favourite stages is Rooftop Run. It has a very whimsical aesthetic, some fun routes, and at the end, I get to live out the fantasy of destroying Big Ben. But I also hate Rooftop Run for its enemy placement. I mentioned the floating death lasers earlier, and they are genuinely the bane of my existence, specifically in this section right here. It's like a death box. And right when I thought I was going to get the hang of it, I forgot about the 2 random robots it places on the runway to the finish line, losing all my rings seconds from the end and tilting me into oblivion. This was my personal demon to conquer. That, and my startling lack of coordination. But overall, chasing the S-ranks was a lot of fun, and I came to appreciate the level design specifically to a much higher degree. It's the little things, like finding the trick to get onto a faster track, or realizing you can entirely skip a bit you were having trouble with, or this stupid little skip where you can ignore 3 enemies and a corner. It feels great. On those stages where you do struggle, finally coming to understand the layouts and enemies and getting that time down, it really is a high. And for the stages you love, you get to appreciate them even more. When I said that Kingdom Valley might be my favourite stage in the game, that came after getting the S rank for it. I love the flow of it, all those funky air trails and rope bounces, and the eagles! It feels like I'm living Lord of the Rings. It's fantastic, I love it, and it's also got some great chaos control bits. But not all stages are made equal. For all the love I give to Kingdom Valley, I have an equivalent hate for Crisis City. I do believe this to be the worst stage that the game has the audacity to make you play. It's got a lot of twists and turns, awkward maneuvers, and honestly the most aggravating obstacles. Not only are the enemies a tried and true pain to deal with, but so is the fire. It's very easy to get clipped by a flame you haven't seen yet, or an enemy firing off when you're halfway to smiting them. It's a pain in the ass. Neither Act 1 nor Act 2 were particularly enjoyable experiences for me, especially when the end of the stage starts flying away. Fortunately though, Crisis City is much more of an anomaly than the exception. Most of the grind led me to find at least one aspect of the stages I could appreciate more than I would have with only one playthrough. That said, one thing that didn't change in the slightest, even after the entire grind, was my overpowering love for Shadow over Sonic. Part of it does feel like Shadow's levels are just straight up designed better, with much more fluidity to them, a number of diverging paths. Even with that though, Shadow is still just more fun to play. When it came to Shadow's S ranks, I chose to do the Doom Wings off version to avoid trivializing them, and this was most definitely the play. Especially the stages that really force you to learn how to get the most out of his other abilities. You'll start to make Barry Allen doubt that he is the fastest man alive, with how swiftly you're hitting those switches and taking the path they open before you can even blink. Even Chaos Island. To be nice, it certainly isn't my favourite level, given that it is centred on the only Doom power that actively slows you down. It's got a clunky design, and I still don't know how to get up there specifically, but getting the most out of Doom Morph and the level's various paths is still more engaging than learning how to play Sonic. But for Shadow to run, Sonic had to walk, or at least run slightly slower, so I still applaud the fact that Sonic Generations is as good as it is after over a decade. So I think I'm starting to get it. It's the goal chasing, the replayability, coming to understand the ins and outs of your favourite stages, especially because if I'm not mistaken, other games have hid endings and stuff behind S-Rank collection. I'm sure there's value to the lore and the characters and stuff like that, but the general game design seems to be the biggest piece of appeal to a Sonic game, which is why the ones that kind of stray away from that are the ones that get the weirdest receptions. But I'm just thinking, that this is where the video is going to get a little awkward as we start to wrap up, because those opinions I had at the start of the video, they haven't really changed all that much. So Sonic and subsequently Shadow Generations are celebration games. Yes, we can all agree on that. That is their purpose. I find it weird then that they, typically speaking, are received much higher than any other Sonic game. Both Generations and Mania, which I understand to be remasters of some of the older 2D games, tend to come up very highly when people are talking about the best Sonic games, which boggles my mind. So I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked my friend after I played this, and I'm asking this out of genuine sincerity. I'm not trying to insult anyone, I'm not trying to piss anyone off, and I'd rather not get ragey comments. I'm asking this genuinely, and I do want to hear what you have to say about it. Is this the best that Sonic gets? As someone that has basically only played this game, remember that. It's just because that strikes me as kind of troubling if that is the case. I've had a lot of fun with Generations, but they aren't exactly the most incredible things I've played. There's a pretty solid layer of jank to them, which sort of just seems to be expected from Sonic games. I'm very much not a fan of that. For Sonic Generations specifically, there's no story to be heard of. The pacing is quite disruptive, and everything is extremely straightforwardly designed. Most of the complexity seems to come from Shadow, which suffers from a fairly lacking number of stages and a very meandering hub world. If this was just Sonic Generations, as it was in 2011, I do not know if I would be feeling nearly as positive about this whole experience, especially considering the price. Both are sort of just solid platformers, even at their best, which is, it's fine. I guess I just expected more from a celebration title from one of the world's most storied franchises. It really doesn't fill me with much motivation to go out and play other Sonic games. Like, it will never not be funny to me how much of this game is celebrating Sonic 06, a game which is almost universally lambasted. I may have come to genuinely enjoy myself when it came to Generations and the Sonic gameplay as a whole, but prior to just a few years ago, I think I would have still felt bad for anyone that considered themselves a fan. And while I may no longer be a hater, I most certainly won't be joining the realms of the fan either. And I definitely won't stop taking the piss because I'm British and that's what we do. Sonic may be on an upward trend at the moment, but so much of that is due to the success of the films. When it comes to the rest of their media, the shows seem to be getting fairly mixed receptions, and game-wise, the ones that are doing well are the ones celebrating older games. Frontiers probably did well financially. I haven't really looked into it. We'll see how time tests that one. But for me personally, it still seems that a lot of its issues were waved away because it's just sort of the first time a Sonic game has been new and competent at the same time. I find it hard to look past all the issues, from its performance to its incredibly bland design work, and the fact that the open world design philosophy is completely counterintuitive to Sonic's whole shindig. There's too much empty space. But again, I haven't played Frontiers, I don't plan on playing Frontiers, so you can feel free to ignore me completely on that front. What remains truthful is that Sonic games have been struggling for like the last 20 years now, and from what I can tell, what has saved them is retreading older titles. I'd love to be wrong about that, by the way, but I have not come to this opinion without reason. You know, most gamers are aware of how Sonic has gone since the 2000s. I just can't imagine being a fan of this franchise and praying every time they release a game that it's not as bad as the last one. But hey, even when Sonic's a little rough, I guess it's still worth playing. It fills that gap of the classic platformer that you don't really get outside of 2D Mario anymore. Even Crash and Spyro have once again receded into the ether as the space becomes much more indie-centered. So I guess what I'm saying is that, as a Sonic hater, I get why people love Sonic. Or at least Shadow.
Lost control. Your future is already decided. We will be one.
I will not be stopped.
Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, I've wanted to make a video like this for an absolute age. I really enjoy diving into games that are popular that I don't know very well and sort of just trying to get the experience of why people enjoy them, even if I don't come out of it having had the greatest time in the world. I still enjoy figuring out why people enjoy games. So, if there's anything else you'd like to see me tackle like this, leave it below and I'll add it to the list that I'll get to in 700 years. I've got a couple projects in the works that should take me into sort of the start of next year. Resident Evil is coming out at some point. I cannot promise it by the end of the year, but the next Resident Evil video is going to kick off a whole thing that will take me through the entire franchise. So, look forward to that. Look forward to that. Anyway, I'll see you later, alligator. In a while, crocodile. I've decided I want to start adding random recommendations at the end of my videos for people that actually somehow get to the end, and then I can tell. Also, it's a fun way for me to talk about extra games that I don't have the time to make videos on. And this time I want to talk about Heartworm. I played the demo on stream last week. Very cool game, survival horror, but you don't have a traditional weapon, you have a camera, and it goes into like over the shoulder perspective when you aim. Very mysterious. It doesn't give away anything for the plot. I think you play through effectively the start of the game, and then it skips forward a couple hours to give you a boss fight with a giant fuck off spider. Really cool demo. Recommend playing. I think this will be very cool when it comes out. Also, it starts with a benchmark, so you can see how your settings will change the game. More games need that. Alright, that's the end of the recommendation.